Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. My name is Asep Suparman, and in this video, I will be talking about validity of criterion difference test. This is a chapter from Brown and Hudson's book entitled Criterion Difference Language Testing, published by UP in 2002. How do I move this? Not moving. Okay. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will begin my talk with the definition of validity, and I'll be moving on to strategies for investigating the validity of CRTs, content validity, and I'll end my talk with a brief discussion of construct validity. So what is it meant to be valid? A test is said to be valid if it measures exactly, accurately, properly what it is intended to be measuring. To understand this concept, I will use this example. So here's an example of a reading comprehension test. If you have a time to pause this video and read the passage, please do. But I will just go on with my talk. Okay, so a reading comprehension test presents a passage like this, and it is followed by a typical question like this. What is the main benefit of owning a dog for children? And here are some example of students' responses. If you have read the passage, then you will know that all responses from students A, B, C are correct. I mean, all students could comprehend the passage properly. But then you notice that there are some grammatical errors and readability issues in the student's response. If you as a teacher gave a score to student C lower than the scores given to students A and B, because of these grammatical errors and readability issue, then your measurement could be said not valid, because in this case, you are measuring students' ability in using, students' ability in writing using proper grammar, instead of measuring students' reading ability. So how do we know if our CRTs are valid? Traditionally, there are three strategies for investigating validity, namely content validity, construct validity, and criterion-related validity. Actually, there is another one called face validity, but I don't think that's relevant to the discussion, because face validity is a matter of judgment from the test takers. So I will just talk about these three strategies. Okay. Out of these three strategies, only content validity and construct validity are applicable for investigating the validity of CRTs. So only these two you could use to investigate the validity of CRTs. Why? Because criterion related validity is based on a correlational analysis. So if you recall the difference between CRTs and RTs, it is that NRTs are designed to produce a normal distribution of scores, while in CRTs the scores may be skewed either positively or negatively. So this normal distribution could not be achieved. So why a criterion related validity could not be applied to investigate the validity of CRTs? Once again, because the normal distribution underlies the correlational analysis which is used in this criterion related validity. So what is content validity? In simple words, content validity refers to the representativeness of the test items to the entire domain the test seeks to measure. For example, if you are measuring a student's ability in speaking, but then you use a paper and pencil test, then your test could not represent the domain of speaking ability. So we can conclude that your test lacks content validity. The content validity is frequently used for achievement tests. So here's another example. If your language program or your course has 6 objectives, for example, your objectives range from C1 to C6 with reference to the Bloom taxonomy framework, but only 4 out of these 6 objectives are covered in the test, then your test lacks content validity as well. There are 2 approaches to content validity, namely theoretical approach and expert judgment approach. In theoretical approach, the content validity is defined according to the current theory, research, and practical perspectives. I highlighted the word current, because it entails that the content validity of a test can be defined differently from time to time. I mean, what was considered valid years ago may not be viewed as valid now because theories and practices may change over the years. So here is an example of how speaking ability is defined differently over the years. So there is this model introduced by Ledo and Carroll in 1960. It is a skills and elements model. According to this model, speaking ability is defined as the ability to speak using appropriate language elements. So if you are using this theoretical framework for constructing your test, then your test will probably measure such things like pronunciation accuracy, grammar, and vocabulary. And then in 1975, there is another model called communicative effectiveness model. According to this model, speaking ability refers to the ability to communicate accurately and effectively in real-life language use context. So the tests were probably like test-based performance that replicates real-life conversational situations. And in this test, for example, you are measuring code complexity, cognitive complexity, and communicative demand, like what is exemplified in the chapter in question by the author, Brown and Hudson. Okay, and the last model, this is probably the most dominantly used model, communicative competence model, introduced by Canali and Swain. According to this model, the speaking ability refers to the ability to communicate using grammatical competence, sociolinguistic competence, discourse competence, and strategic competence. If you are using this theoretical framework for constructing your speaking ability test, then your test probably measure such thing like ability to create grammatically correct utterances, ability to produce sociolinguistically appropriate utterances, ability to produce coherent and cohesive utterances, and ability to solve communication problems when they arise. The second approach to content validity is expert judgment. As the name suggests, in this approach, the content validity is defined according to the judgments of experts. This judgment is based on the relevance of test items to the content, to the objectives of the course. But something that should be noted that these expert judgments will be better if the test has been previously designed on the basis of theoretical research and practical factors. So still, if you use this expert judgment approach, you still need a theoretical judgment, a theoretical approach. I mean, and then also it is necessary that these experts share the same view with the test constructors. If the if these experts agree with each other on the relevance of the test items to the content, then the test is deemed to have content validity. So here's an example of content validity judgment scale. Unfortunately, I don't understand Tagalog, but I could say that this guideline using no match to perfect match Likert scale to the SCTFL guideline. So probably these experts will judge, will assess if these items match to the guidelines or not using this Likert scale. But is it enough to only investigate CRTs using content validity? Well, content validity only deals with the representativeness and relevance of the test item to the course objectives. In other words, content validity only focuses on the instruments rather than the measurements. Therefore, the validity of CRTs should also be investigated from the perspective of measurement. In this case, you are using construct validity. But before defining what a construct validity is, I would like to define what a construct is. A construct is actually like a psychological attribute or ability or skill that happens in the human brain. So, and it is defined by established theories. So a construct is very hard to observe. An example of a psychological construct is love. You know, love is very hard to observe, and hence it is hard to measure. You know that love exists, but you cannot observe it. So if you want to measure how much someone loves you, you cannot measure it directly. Instead, maybe you are measuring how big his love is from the way he treats you or from things that he buys he buys for you. Okay, that's an example of a psychological construct. Some examples of a linguistic construct maybe include proficiency, communicative competence, and fluency. Then a test is said to have construct validity if it measures the construct that the test claims to be measuring. For example, if you are if you are assessing fluency, then you should probably measure such aspects like speed, rhythm, articulation, and the lack of hesitation and fillers, for example. So you could now assess my fluency. You know that this my talk is not really fluent enough because I use a lot of fillers. There are three approaches to construct validity, namely intervention study, differential group study, and hierarchical structure study. But I will only have a brief discussion of intervention study because the other two will be discussed by Bu Melissa. So you could investigate that your CRTs have construct validity or not by conducting an intervention study, by administering a pretest before the teaching and post-test after the teaching. If there is a significant improvement in the student score between the pretest and post-test, then it is it is safe enough to say that your CRTs have construct validity. But the question is how significant this improvement should be. Well, you could say that your CRTs have construct validity if your statistical calculation says that the improvement is significant. Maybe you could use t-test, ANOVA, Mann-Whitney, or Wilcoxon, depending on uh, the context, depending on the scores of the test. Okay, that's all my talk, and this talk will be continued by Bu Melissa. Thank you very much for watching. Bu Melissa, the screen is yours. Assalamualaikum.